All right, welcome back. And this is going to be the latest thing we're going to take a look at. This is a beautiful old Sony CDP-501ES compact disc player. This is going to be probably second generation, manufactured in '85, I believe. Truly stunning to look at this absolute beautiful piece of equipment. Brushed aluminum face, perfect almost, hardly any scratches on the top. This is a personal project. I purchased this off of eBay. This player was originally, or this video was originally scheduled for a 1987 Pioneer single disc player, the first CD player I ever bought for myself. And as it turns out, the seller sent me the wrong CD player, and after 3 weeks of swapping emails back and forth, it was determined that player had already been sold and the wrong picture was listed for the one that I received. So I decided I would buy this. This goes a little beyond my normal budget for something broken. Usually 35 bucks with the shipping charge is about my maximum. This I paid 55 bucks for. The seller basically states that the tray will open, but it won't close. So there's quite a few things circulating in my mind over the last week while I was waiting for this as to what could be the problem with it. This was kind of a roll of the dice on whether or not there could be something mechanical broken that I can't repair, and I'm certainly not going to be able to get a new piece. So I didn't want to wind up with a $55 doorstop. But it's a player that I've always wanted. I've always wanted one of these early generation Sonys, and I've only worked on a few of these, maybe 4 or 5. And they are truly beautiful on the inside to look at and beautiful on the outside to look at. Incredible piece of audio technology. So, as always, we'll come in, we'll take a look at the inside, checking out the circuitry, how they did everything, how they laid everything out. And then from that point, we'll have a look and see if we can find out what's working and what's not working. So give me a minute to get set up for that, and we'll get started. Alright, coming back in, we're going to have a look at the front first. Here you'll find just your basic controls, power switch, timer switch, in case you want to set it up to play a disc on some sort of timed program. We've got an attenuator for the headphone jack, not an actual rotary control. They put the open close button right in the tray. That's aluminum, not plastic. And then the basic play functions of the disc: play, pause, and stop, as well as track skip forward, track skip back, and then track advancement. And I don't know what the 3 arrows are all about. Maybe that's double timing the speed of advancing the track. Not sure what that is. We got an index, followed by the repeat function, which is pretty popular on these early Sonys, where you repeat one song, all the songs, or just a selection from a song back and forth. And the elapsed time remaining button, whereas you can get a look at the entire minutes of a disc and count backwards from that point, I guess, or starting from 0, counting up to the end of a particular song. The auto pause, which I assume stops at the end of the disc or the end of a song on the disc. I'm not sure about that one either. And then the line out variable control. There's 2 sets of RCAs in the back, one fixed and one variable, and this control gives you the option to just adjust the volume from the front of the unit versus at your receiver. Coming up over the top, 4 screws, gets the top plate off. Top plate is in really nice shape. Don't know how well we can see it here, but there's not very many scratches on it, if there's any. Few surface scratches. Put some padding in the top, I guess, for absorbing noise. Just taking a look at this mechanism, it is definitely something to behold. We got numerous safety switches for the drawer, IR detect for the disc, and everything seems to be nice and sturdy. Metal pieces. Disc stabilizer in this is motor controlled. Of course, you have your normal laser warning label and the laser aperture sticker on this. In the back, you got your transformer. On the earlier versions, that transformer would extend out the back and there'd be kind of a humped place there where you could see it off the back. It wasn't flat on the back. Heat sink with regulators for the power supply. And in the back here, the lower circuit board, I'm going to assume is digital analog conversion, signal processing, and the top board I'm going to say systems control and servo. There's multiple screws that hold the board in place, but you take the screws loose and the board just folds up. There's hinges, plastic hinges here, which is very popular with Sony stuff. One notable thing I noticed right off the get-go is this glue that they use to fix components to the board with. This was used by all the major Japanese manufacturers in the 80s, pretty much all of them anyway. And over time, what happens is that'll turn brown and get conductive. It can also be corrosive and eat traces up. So that will definitely be removed at the end of everything if it's not causing problems already. So definitely a beautiful piece. So I think the next step, let's pause here and let me get it hooked up, and we'll see if we can get the drawer out and get a disc in and see if we got anything. So give me a second for that and I'll come back. All right, power is applied and on, but unfortunately when I hit the button, disc stabilizer does raise, but the tray struggles to try to come out. Don't want to force it. So, and then it just finally just gives up. So I'm not sure where he got the theory the tray would come out but wouldn't go back in, but maybe that's what he experienced. But it seems to only ease out just that much. And you can hear the mechanism whining, but to my knowledge this was direct drive. I don't think there's any belts in it. So let me pop the bottom off and we'll come back and have a look at that as soon as I get the tray back in there. Let's see here. There we go. Yeah, let me get the bottom off and then we'll come back and go a little further. All right, as we come back in with the bottom removed from it, getting a real good look at the bottom portion of the mechanism and all the motors and things that are moving. When we hit the tray out button on the front, we can see the motor moving for the disc stabilizer, but when it comes time for the tray to come out, we get a lot of motor noise, but not much movement. Just barely moving. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. And just looking around here, we have a feeder motor for the sled assembly for the laser, direct drive spindle motor, and then of course the disc stabilizer motor that raises and lowers that. And this particular one does have a KSS 100A optical pickup in it, which brings about a little bit of worry as to whether or not that is still okay or has issues. Lots of things happening in this. Lots of interlock switches, one for everything, sometimes two. Up here on this board, I noticed there's a bundle of wires going into the circuit board that switch is mounted on, and they're all covered in that brown glue, which started out as yellow and turned brown. So again, that'll all have to be removed. On the bottom side of the signal board, there's only a couple of spots of that glue that I see. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the first thing is to get to where this is, because that motor is moving. You can feel it just chugging away. So there's probably a split right down the middle of the connecting gear that goes on the end of the shaft of this motor. And so could have just been a natural failure. The tray could have came out, the guy couldn't get the tray back in and decided to push on the tray and force it closed. Hopefully that's not the case, but from what I'm seeing right here though, it looks to me like this is going to be the first spot we're going to have to open up and take a look at. And just kind of looking at it from a distance here, I'm not sure how to get to this. I guess the thing to do is probably go through the top of the mechanism and see if we can get access somehow to get that out, but it looks like the front might have to come off before we'd even be able to get the motor out. So I'll go ahead and start working on this, get this motor out, get it to the point to where we can see what's going on with it, and then we'll pick it back up. All right, coming back in, we did find 2 screws underneath the bottom after leaning the unit back to get access where it won't let you take that motor out without taking more apart, but it will let you manipulate it to the point where you can get it over and see it. And pretty much what I thought is dead on. There's a crack right down the center of that gear. So now we're kind of dead in the water until I figure something out for this. And there's going to be one of 2 possibilities. Maybe one, I might have a gear that might work, or 2, we'll have to somehow fuse that gear back to that shaft, which has never really worked out for me in the past. Any attempts to try to epoxy a broken gear to the shaft has always failed. It may have not failed right away, but eventually it did fail. And so I just got away from doing that, just simply because it just never worked on a permanent basis. So let me pause and let's try to figure out something to do about this, but we are dead in the water until that can be resolved, because that tray's not going to open right. So I'll pick it back up when I figure out a solution to this. All right, well, trying to find another gear, even in all my collection, I just don't have anything like this. But what I did do was taking a look at this guy from, there's a raised edge on it. And so what I did was I took a lock washer, and those lock washers have, you know, like a they're kind of offset, they're not perfectly flat. And I straightened it out and then squeezed it into itself with a pair of pliers, and it was the perfect dimensions to slip right over the top of that, and obviously holds it very snug. It's not coming off. You'd have to pry it off to get it off. So I'm going to put this back on the motor and we're going to give this a shot. And it's going to go down like this, but yet it's not exceeding past this point. This is really hard to focus on and see it. Yeah, that is really hard to focus on and see that. Anyway, you can see there's a little bit of plastic left on the top, so it ain't like that. That washer is not going to rub on anything, and the gear that it's going to mate with is going to wind up in the middle part of this, so it ain't going to hit that. So I'm going to stick that back on there, and we're going to give this a shot and see if this will work. This is really our only option, because I don't have another gear. And gluing it will only be a temporary fix. So let me get the motor put back in, and then we'll see what we have. All right, coming back. Gear installed, and we have a working unit. And I think the only casualty of this is the tray is a little noisy, but I recall these were noisy, so that gear is not scraping on anything. The one that I made the repair on is meshing with the gear right next to it perfectly fine. So I think this is just a case of that tray is aluminum. There is a lot of gears that's running it, so I think it just is a case of it being noisy. So turns out that getting that motor out of that slot that it was in was a hell of a lot easier than trying to put it back in there. And it is kind of jammed up in there to where it's really difficult to manipulate it. And then once you get it to the point to where you need to mesh it up with the gears, then you have to play that whole song and dance where you get a screw started and you don't want it too tight against the next gear, so you got to kind of play with it a little bit. So, but to say that I'm thrilled about the fact that this thing is working is an understatement. The laser itself was a big concern. You know, who knows how many, this is a early generation player, so who knows how long this thing had actually been, you know, used before it broke and was thrown in a closet somewhere. So, but yeah, it is doing its thing. I think the next thing I want to do is I'm going to look at some of the grease. And from what I've already kind of messed around with, it looks like everything is still moving pretty fluidly. There's a locking mechanism here, and you can see it has just a little bit, it doesn't spring back real quick. And so I'm going to have to kind of touch that up. The grease itself, though, there isn't anything wrong with that. It seems fine, so there must be something gunked up where that lever goes on the post. So we'll look into that and kind of straighten that up. And then I definitely want to get this glue removed and do a little bit of cleaning on the laser. As far as underneath the unit is concerned, again, the same deal. The grease here seems fine. I'm not going to mess with it. So I'm going to do just a few preventative maintenance things here, and then we're going to hook it up and we'll pull the service manual. I've already kind of briefly looked at it before this unit even made it to my house. 75-page service manual, very detailed as far as alignment if you need to do an alignment on one of these, but in this case I've played this a few different times now, and it seems fine. But we're going to put in the test CD, look at that. We're also going to put in a burnt CD and see how it does with that. And then from that point, we'll see what our eye pattern looks like. But just to get to this point to where it'll actually play a disc is makes me pretty happy. So let me go ahead. I'm going to remove the glue, just touch up anything mechanism wise with grease or oil that would need to be done, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more testing with it and see how it performs with not so nice discs. This is a brand new disc pretty much, so we'll see how it will do with a disc that's not quite that nice. So give me a second for that and we'll come back. All right, let's come back briefly here and just have a look at this pad of glue. And a lot of times the component that they've used the glue to secure to the board, if you just kind of gently pry up on that, it'll remove the whole pad of glue at the same time. And so I'm curious to know how lucky I can get on that, if I can get lucky at all. So I'm going to give it a shot here. It looks like it might want to do it. Look at that. Got lucky. And even though there isn't any noticeable trace damage here, this was covering quite a few jumpers. And so even if it wasn't a problem now, it probably wouldn't have taken too long with normal use for this to become a problem. So it's probably tempting to use a dental pick, and I've done it myself. And I've also damaged traces doing it, so be wary of that. So now all we got to do is just get it off of this component. So I thought it would be interesting just to document it to see how lucky I got trying to pull it up. So we'll come back when I finish up the rest of the maintenance things. All right, we're going to come back in for a quick maintenance checkup here. And in the process of getting the glue off, I've been working on the glue for probably about 40 minutes, and I went ahead and had to pull out filter caps from the power supply. 4 so far to get the glue cleaned up, but what I really wanted to point out to you is what this glue does. If you take a look right here, they have that glue positioned to where it's coming into contact with the lead on that diode, and you can see how that lead is starting to corrode and how a dark brown that glue is. So this is really what this will do. If it doesn't cause continuity, it will cause corrosion, and eventually that lead, if it's not already bad enough to where I need to change it, it would rot right through that. It would eat right through that. So this is kind of what the glue thing does, in case you were wondering about that. But there's quite a bit of it down here in the power supply. When I pulled the top board up, I knew I'd probably find some more of it. I just didn't realize there was that much. So I'm kind of meticulously working my way through it to try to get it all off. Not going to take, if it's not covering any components, I won't mess with it. But I've been chipping away at it pretty good here for a while. So just kind of wanted to show you that, what you can expect this glue can do to certain components in the circuit that it comes into contact with. So progress to come. All right, coming back in after about an hour plus spent chipping away at the glue to get it all out of the power supply. Basically required me to remove 4 sets of caps, the blue ones, the black ones, the red ones here, and the red ones over here, and gave me access to get in there and start chipping away at it. It's not a really easy location to work, and so basically just used a tip of an X-Acto knife once I got the caps out, and just kind of chipped away at it with that. And over here in this area, once I got down to this, I did decide to go ahead and replace that diode. It's just too simple of a thing to not change it. The lead was green and kind of, deteriorated a little bit, so didn't want to risk having a failure after the fact. So
And after everything is said and done, you know, we're back together and still working, which is always a plus, especially after that much surgery. I want to make sure that didn't lose something in that process of all that work, but everything seems to be good. So I think also underneath the bottom of this, I did meticulously chip it off of that switch underneath all those wires, and that was kind of an ordeal in itself getting that off. Also found a piece right down here by that interlock switch. So everything else, it's all covered. I didn't see any more, so I'm going to assume that we're okay on glue. Didn't get a chance to get to the mechanism. That's going to be included in part 2. At this point, I originally intended for the video to just be one part, but unfortunately there's just a little too much to do to this. And since I'm planning on keeping it, I want to kind of go through everything real well and you know, spend the time to do it right the first time so I don't have to do it a second time. So we're going to tentatively say this is part 1, and next week I will finish up with part 2 of the Sony CDP-501ES vintage, true vintage compact disc player.